Hi everybody, Eric Ritter with Strategic Financial Group. For today's Dollars and Cents with SFG, I'd like to share some thoughts on the financial journey. And more specifically, I'd like to kind of reframe actually how a lot of investors as well as financial advisors actually view that journey. So instead of viewing your financial journey as kind of one sort of long continuum, I'd like to challenge you to actually think about it in two separate phases. Namely, that's the accumulation phase and the distribution phase. And so I thought actually today a visual aid might be kind of helpful in explaining why this is really such a critical shift in how you view your financial journey. So here you go. One way to think about these two distinct halves of your retirement is that of a mountain trek. So the peak or summit is the first primary goal, which is naturally your retirement. And to be sure, retirement will look different for each person. That's actually why many times we prefer to think of it more as a work optional lifestyle, where you have the financial independence to accomplish what it is you actually want to do. So on the left side of the mountain, on the way up, we start with the accumulation phase. This is our 20, 30, 40-year period where you're working hard, you're saving for retirement so that one day you can live off that nest egg that's grown over time. Some of the vehicles to help you do this might be, a pension plan, although those are certainly less and less common these days, 401ks, 403bs, 457s, all depending on the nature of the organization that you work for. Now, you might have a self-directed savings plan where you, perhaps in coordination with your advisor, are saving for retirement. So that's your IRA, an individual retirement account, maybe a Roth IRA or a brokerage account. But the key here, the main focus here in terms of risk is, does the level of risk in your portfolio, your investments, does that align with your personal risk score? So that you don't panic and you don't abandon your long-term plan when we encounter the unexpected, like a global pandemic and self-imposed economic shutdown. I'll add one other risk on this side of the mountain, the accumulation phase. If I were to get hit by the proverbial bus on the way home today from work, I would need to make sure that I'm covered so that my wife and 4 kids will be okay financially. So making sure you're properly insured, from various risks and liabilities, that's also certainly important in the accumulation phase. So 20, 30, 40 years goes by, you've stuck to your plan, and you finally reached that summit. And you now have that work optional lifestyle. So now you're entering a completely different phase of your financial journey. This is the distribution phase. And so now the focus has actually changed as well. So instead of trying to, grow your nest egg as quickly and as efficiently as your personal risk tolerance will allow in the accumulation phase, the goal is now to figure out, how are we going to make your savings, that nest egg, last throughout your retirement? Instead of a focus on, asset allocation, your kind of stock bond mix, the focus is now shifted to, a focus on asset designation. In other words, we're assigning a job description to your money for specific purposes. And we need to change, a change in focus, because once you plant the flag at the top of the mountain and you start heading down, the number and actually the severity of the risks that you face increase. The same is actually true in mountain climbing. If you do any research on Everest, or you listen to the Sherpas that help navigate climbers up and down that mountain, you'll find out that over 80% of the deaths actually occur near the summit or on the way down. So likewise, in the financial journey, down the mountain, there are a number of risks that we need to plan for. Social Security that you see there first, for every couple, there are dozens of ways to elect Social Security. It represents roughly 37%, of the average household income in retirement. And it's one of the reasons actually that our firm Strategic Financial has offered over 150 Social Security seminars in the last number of years. But that election cannot be taken just simply in a vacuum. You need to understand how that claiming strategy will actually affect your other decisions and how it's going to impact the rest of your financial situation. Pension planning. Traditional pensions, that again I mentioned earlier, they've mostly gone by the wayside, but for those lucky enough to have one to supplement their guaranteed Social Security income, we'll perform a pension max analysis on that. Market risks. This is very different than the market risk that you think of and that you're subject to in the accumulation phase. Nobody likes to lose money in the market, but it's especially challenging when the market drops significantly and you are now having to actually live off of those assets. When you go back to the accumulation phase, when you're working and saving and using, you're used to be able to actually take advantage of market downturns. Now contrast that in retirement when you actually have to sell assets to pay the bills. When those assets are down in value, that money actually never has a chance to come back in value. We call this sequencer return risk, and it's actually one of the most important challenges we solve for with our clients. Much more important than your average rate of return in retirement is what are your actual returns you personally experience in the first 10 or 15 years of your retirement. All right, moving on. Healthcare. A healthcare event or long-term care need can very quickly blow a hole in any financial plan. And there's really, when you boil it down, kind of two paths here that you can take. You can either self-insure that risk with your own savings, or you can transfer that risk to an insurance company. So there's pros and cons to each of those situations, and it's probably one of the more difficult discussions that we have to have with clients. It's an emotional one, to be sure, but it's a discussion that needs to be had. Longevity risk. There are many variables in retirement that we don't know, and one of those certainly is, how long are you and your spouse going to live? And related to that, how do we plan so that you don't don't outlive your money? All right, taxes. We partner very closely with a couple of CPAs. In fact, we actually bring them into our planning process when we onboard new clients. Investing, it's not just about what you make, but actually how much can you keep after you make it. And now at 25 trillion and counting in national debt, we need to plan for the potential of increasing tax rates in retirement. So Roth IRA conversions, they're certainly a big component of that. One of the reasons is, we still need to invest in the distribution phase is simply due to inflation. We know that a tank of gas, a loaf of bread, healthcare costs, they're going to rise over time. And one of the best ways to offset the loss of purchasing power is to have an appropriate portion of your assets invested in the market. And then lastly here you see inheritance. You may need to plan for estate tax issues depending on the size of that and tax law. How much and when are you comfortable gifting to your children or your preferred charitable organizations? Those are all questions that need to be addressed. This is really all in the context of your legacy planning. So hopefully now you can see why it's important that you treat the second half of your financial journey much different than the first half. And it's also why we've built out our proprietary process called the sequential formula to help our clients navigate whichever part of the journey they are on. That's pretty much a wrap. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, we would be happy to be a sounding board for you or someone you care about. So thanks, and make it a great day.